Let's now shift focus back to Nigeria's economy. The economy could be heading for a recession by the end of this year on the back of massive decline in crude oil prices caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, the slump in oil prices caused by the COVID-19 has forced many companies, including international oil companies operating in the Nigerian industry, to slash their capital budgets and also suspend some projects. Nigeria's overdependence on oil for its revenue and foreign exchange earnings continues to weaken the fiscal capacity, just as high rates of unemployment rates continue to soar. Infrastructure deficit, poor power supply, among other problems, have continued to also increase vulnerability to external shocks. The outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic has equally led to disruptions to the global economy and people's lives and adversely affected the oil market, tourism, investment, supply chains, capital markets, and even funding the 2020 budgets. These highlighted conditions and others negatively affect Nigeria's macroeconomic stability and resilience to withstand external pressure. Macroeconomic research analyst at United Capital, Yinka Ademuwagun, via Skype, now joins me from Lagos Island to discuss much more on these issues. Good to have you on the show now, and it's a pleasure to have you now. Yinka, let's first of all start off. Now, the outbreak of the coronavirus definitely has shaken all of the global key sectors that we know, and we look at key supply chains also largely affected. But for the oil and gas sector, it's literally bleeding due to the volatility in the markets. There's no prediction that we can make so far. What do you make of the impact we've seen so far?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show this afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. For the outbreak, yeah, we've seen it has had a negative impact for the oil and gas sector. As you've said, the latest report is showing the rig count within the country is already down. That's showing that there are already numbers of shutting that we are seeing in the local economy. And this is the same case across the world. Even in the US, the numbers of rig counts are dropping by the day as capex expenditure by oil and gas companies are being cut across the board. Also, you could notice that even from the budget for 2020, the revised budget, we saw the revision. According to the latest revision, oil revenue is being cut by 90%. That's massive. This is a particular revenue segment that contributes more than 50% of revenue on a normal day, on a normal year. But for this year, we're already estimating a 90% drop in revenue from the oil and gas sector. That tells us a lot. And this is also a sector that is responsible for about 80% of export earnings, which also speaks to the fact that that will affect the level of FX liquidity in the system, which is what we're seeing at the moment. And also for the non-oil sector, the lockdown policies that have been implemented across the world is negatively affecting global supply chain. Export and import is being affected negatively. Consumption expenditure also is affected negatively. Investment expenditure are also being paused by foreign investors and local investors because of the uncertainty that is in the environment. Government expenditure at the moment, there are a lot of uncertainty around that also as they look to get new finances from external loan or multilateral agencies and also domestic capital markets also. Yeah, on an overall note, the impact of COVID-19 and the oil price shock has been negative for Nigeria on an overall note. Thank you.
Now, Yinka, let's talk about Nigeria, but taking a stronger cue at what you just made mention of, we have a situation of dwindling foreign reserves, but Nigeria is expected to cut oil production further in line with the fresh moves from OPEC. We've had a situation of glut, and then we also have the reality of inadequate storage facilities due to low purchase of Nigeria's crude. Now, in stemming the tide, what's your expectation in terms of managing all of this cuts and the implication that we would have as well?
So correct. To be fair enough, for the current administration, they've implemented quite some bold policy in the form of some cost-cutting strategy that we've seen. Earlier in the year, we saw the regulation of the downstream oil and gas sector, where redundant costs like subsidy would have been removed as a result of that. So these are the things that the federal government needs to do. They need to look inward to cut cost further. But again, given the level of shock that we're seeing at the moment and the health crisis, the lack of infrastructure in terms of hospitals, in terms of medical equipment that we do not have. So we need to incur expenditure. We need to incur those capital expenditure to be able to meet that shortfall in the healthcare sector. And also in the telecommunication sector, as people work from home, you need to ramp up infrastructure to meet up that demand that is now there in that particular market. So ease of doing business also is very, very important at this point in time, especially as people transition to online business transactions. Also, on the side again, the government needs to also look at the policies in terms of how they are going to reopen the economy gradually, which is what they are doing at the moment. We give credit to them for that. But if you look at it, if you weigh all of these circumstances, the numbers of sectors that are going to be negatively affected by the lockdown policies outweighs the number of sectors that are going to gain from all of these. Right at the top of my head, I could mention a few. For the telecommunication sector, here they are set to gain as people start to work from home. The healthcare sector also is likely to gain as more investments and more expenditures are targeted towards that sector. But for the agri sector, due to supply chain issues, the ban in interstate movements, that is likely going to affect movement of our agricultural items. And the lack of storage facilities, the lack of proper power supply, those are another reasons why we would have supply chain issues in the non-oil sector, especially for the agri sector, because those are perishable items and they would need electricity to stay stable. So all of these are the variables that to look at for now. Yeah.
Now, Yinka, for some analysts, well, they say increasing your cost-cutting measures are not enough. We've seen IOCs and other companies as well within the oil and gas sector cutting expenditure, capital budget, suspending projects as well. And we also look at Nigeria's active oil rigs also falling by about 23.8% to about 16 just last month due to the coronavirus pandemic and its implication. Nigeria has recorded the second biggest decline when we are talking about oil rigs now. In terms of all of this, do you see a further plunge in the resources we might likely get from oil? And do you think we can possibly stabilize this market to say we are going to reinvest all of the yields we've had so far in diversifying the economy from oil receipts? This is a little bit late to do so, but what are the short-term measures you expect us to take now to stabilize our local oil market?
So for us, we believe the government have been proactive enough. They've constituted some committees like the Economic Sustainability Committee, which is working alongside the Economic Advisory Council. And we are starting to see the impact of all of these advisory committees on the policies that have been implemented. In time past, you would have seen a government that will be struggling to revise its estimates for 2020, but they've been proactive enough to do that. And based on the new estimates, crude oil price benchmark has been revised to $25 per barrel. From our own decks, we're expecting oil price to average about $30 per barrel. So that tells us that is still fair, in line with current reality. Then also for production, we're estimating 2.18 million barrels per day before, but now we've revised that production to 1.94 million barrels per day now. And that is still kind of achievable, even if you add condensates to what we're going to be doing in line with the OPEC plus cuts. So on an overall level, the new projections looks more realistic, especially for the oil revenue segment. But our concern, however, is for the non-oil sector. We feel most of the projections for the non-oil sector are still overly optimistic. With the new realities that are in our macro environment.
Talking about, let me button here. Talking about the level of optimism we've had so far, some are still saying even our current oil benchmark, despite the revision, is still way too optimistic. But let's now take a look at the price modulation with which the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources earlier announced, and we've also seen downward revision of the pump price of petrol, also reflecting what's going on the international market. As at last week, Brent crude on the OPEC basket, we're trading at about $17. Now we are comfortably between $20, $25 now. We have all of those realities there, but with the minister, with the private oil marketing firms now giving the clearance to also import petrol, the landing cost of petrol still remains a major issue. These are individuals who still play big in the market. What should we be doing right in terms of modulating these prices to also reflect the current happenings in the market?
In terms of modulation and also encouraging private marketers to start importing crude oil, I think the biggest problem there is FX, ability to assess FX. At the moment, most of the marketers are uncertain the rate at which they are going to be assessing the FX. Would it be at the INA rate? Would it be at the official rate of 360? Because before now, NNPC has been the one importing crude oil, and they've been using the official rate. So for the oil marketers, would they also be able to assess FS at the official rate, or would they be getting it at the INA rate? So all of these are the clarity that these marketers will need. And at the moment, there's been concern around FX liquidity. The CBN is not selling as much as it used to. So that again, it will be the major talking point for the marketers and the major decider for the marketers. If they can get FX, now it's a good time for them to start importing prices now that they've deregulated, so they can sell at an higher price when price starts going upward. That is the expectation. But for now, the question is, will they be able to assess FS to import the crude oil as at when they need them? So that's the big question.
That's the big question, most definitely. And as markets are slowly reopening, we'll hopefully see a stronger demand. Thank you very much for your time on the show. We've been speaking with macroeconomic research analyst Yinka Ademuwagun. Thank you very much for your contribution on the show.